Tonight's reading is going to come from Luke chapter 6, 27 through 36. But I say to you who are listening, love your enemies, do good things to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also, and from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who asks of you, and if anyone takes away what is yours, do not ask for it back again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. If you lend to those from whom you expect to receive payment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again. Instead, love your enemies, do good and lend, expect nothing in return. Your reward will be great, and you will be the children of the Most High. For He Himself is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. More of the radical Jesus. Had we had service last week, I was going to talk about the radical Jesus, but we didn't have it. So I had to, when I'm talking about the radical Jesus, is the first part of this whole sermon, this whole part is this sermon in Luke, is the sermon in the plain where he was sitting in talking with them, and he started with the blessings and the woes. In Matthew, it's called the Beatitudes. It's the preamble to the coming sermon. And his ideas there were very radical. So here we're going to talk about another thing, such as loving your enemy. Is that a radical idea? Is that something that is new? I know this, when I think about this, and I think about this text today, and I figured out who the detective I was talking about is Poirot, Hercule Poirot. He always talks about his little gray cells are activated. And this is one of those ones that activates my little gray cells to think about what's going on. Because does this part that we're reading, these verses, were they radical for their time? Should they be? I mean, we know the statement, loving your enemies. We've heard it before. We've probably said it before. We try to live it. But have we really been listening to what Jesus is saying here? Do we really hear what he's talking about throughout that whole thing? I mean, Jesus starts this message, he starts it with a call to active listening. When you think about this, in the New Living Translation, he starts off with, but to you who are willing to listen. In the New Revised Standard Version, the updated, which is the newest version of the New Revised Standard, it says, but I say to you who are listening. In my Bible, which is the older New Revised Standard, it's at least 20 years old. I got it in the early 2000s, and it's hard to believe that the early 2000s are 20 years ago now. It just says, but I say to you that listen. He's calling us to active listening. The New Living Translation is saying to all that are willing to listen, want to listen, or even have a predisposition to listen. The New Revised Standard Updated is saying to the ones who at this moment are listening in that translation. And my Bible is talking about the ones that do listen or have a capacity to listen. They're the same, but at the same time, they're just a little bit different. So first of all, let's talk about listening. What does active listening mean? I know it's something that I heard when I was being trained as a young manager. I've gone through it. I think when I was in Boy Scouts, I took a youth training program. They were talking about active listening. You go to any psychiatrist or psychologist, they talk about active listening. So what does that mean? Well, I went on Google and I looked up active listening, and the best definition I could find so far is from the Harvard Business Review. If they don't know what it is, I don't know who does. Their definition is active listening is when you not only hear what someone is saying, but also attune to their thoughts and feelings. It turns a conversation into an active, non-competitive, I think that's some of the key wording there, non-competitive, two-way interaction. Once again, there's many similar definitions, but this kind of encapsulates the idea of active listening. Now, in this context, in the Bible, how is that being told? How's that being said? Well, I find the book of James defines it for us fairly well as far as active listening. James chapter 1, verse 22. Be doers of the word, not merely hearers who deceive themselves. How many times do we go into church and we hear the words? We go into a study and we hear the words, but are we actually listening, paying attention, and then actually try to do the words? And how do we get there? First, we pray. Paul, anytime he went into a new city, he prayed. He went to a synagogue and he prayed. Jesus, before he made any decisions, before he did anything, he prayed. So for ourselves, when we go into church, we should take a moment and pray for just the ability to understand. Before we read, the ability to understand so we can hear what God is saying. Just hearing it is not always enough in the act of listening that Jesus is calling us to do. We must connect with the message. We can't forget the words that are being said in his message. So Jesus starts this with, but I say to you that listen, who are listening, who are willing to listen, all of that, love your enemy. That's a big idea right there, love your enemy. If I'm hearing Jesus right, he wants us to love those that are enemies. That is what I read there. That's how I understand it. But that has to be a new idea, right? That's something he came up with at that time, loving your enemy. It can't be something from the Old Testament. We know Jesus preached from the Old Testament all the time. Is loving our enemy something from the Old Testament? Is it written in there? I honestly don't remember a lot of times when God or any of the prophets were talking about this. But then that falls into, were we listening when God was talking through the Old Testament? If we go to Exodus 23, verses 4 through 5, if you come upon your enemy's ox or donkey that has strayed away, take it back to its owner. If you see that donkey of someone who hates you has collapsed under its load, do not walk by. Instead, stop and help. How many times do we see someone, I don't know. How many of us have a donkey and an ox? Anybody? No. So we put it in modern context, the car. You see your neighbor or someone that you know that's your enemy, someone you don't like, and they're having problems with their car. Do you ever stop and help them? Or you go, oh, they deserve that. Those guys, oh, sorry about your luck, buddy. Where here, even in Exodus, this was at a time when Moses was up on Mount Sinai receiving the law. And he's being told by God, if you see that donkey of someone who has collapsed, stop and help. That's kind of a way of showing love to your enemy, is it not? Proverbs chapter 24, verse 17. Don't rejoice when your enemies fail. Don't be happy when they stumble. How many times do we see our enemies fail, that person you don't like, fall and stumble in whatever way, and we go, boy, they deserve that. And you feel a joy about that, don't you? But we don't rejoice in that, do we? We're there to help them. Jesus asked for us to help them. Job, you want to talk about someone who wanted to, talk about his enemies. Job was very much being put upon by his enemy, the enemy. Have I ever rejoiced when disaster struck my enemies? Have I ever become excited when harm came in their way? No, I have never sinned by cursing anyone or by asking for revenge. This is Job chapter 31, 29 through 30. These are times when we could absolutely accept the fact that if our enemy's failing, something's going wrong, why can't we be happy? Isn't that the way it's supposed to be? Isn't that really what society says we are allowed to do? Even when we get into Kings, 2 Kings chapter 6, 21 through 22. When the king of Israel saw them, he shouted to Elisha. This is after Elijah, and Elisha took over his ministry and his prophetic works. If you remember that, he was given the mantle in a very real way, given his coat to carry on, doing his things. But this king shouted to Elisha, my father, should I kill them? Should I kill them? He's talking about his enemies. Elisha, of course not, Elisha replied. Do we kill prisoners of war? Give them food and drink and send them home again to their master. So he's talking about people who are actively, military soldiers who are actively coming against them to hurt them. And he says, give them food and send them home. Be nice to them. Be kind to them. Love them. So this isn't a new idea, is it? Jesus isn't starting anything new. There are stories where the enemies were destroyed in the Old Testament, plenty of them, but many of those stories happen because this is the plan of God. God does this. And at the same time, we're there to help each other and guide us through these problems. In that time, even now, we're almost told or expected to hate those who are enemies, or the people who curse us, and the ones who would abuse us. We're almost allowed to do that. It's almost expected. But sometimes we do this in ways that aren't always physical, like with the military or with physically harming people. Many times we hurt people financially. We enjoy hurting people financially, mentally, even in a psychological way. That's a big thing. We love hurting people. We will sue people right away. Christ tells us to love them, to bless them, and pray for those who would do that. How radical is that idea? I mean, if someone strikes my cheek, I'm going to show them how much I can strike them back. Aren't we allowed to do that? Aren't we told to do that? If someone hurts you, you're allowed to hurt them back. You're allowed to take your recompense on that person. If someone steals your jacket, aren't you allowed to go after them, to sue them? They take your stuff. You can prosecute. You can call the police upon them. Don't we do that to our enemies, to the people we don't like? Call me a name. I'm going to call you names back. Something I thought about this afternoon, I used to tell the kids when they wanted to argue with me, and this is where I've changed now. Back then, I wasn't so nice. They'd start arguing with me. I'd say, listen, kids, one of us is going to walk away from this conversation crying, and it's not going to be me. Now, is that how we should be? Not that my children were ever my enemies, but at that moment, they wanted to come after me. I was going to come after them back. Is that how we should be? Is that what Christ is asking us to be? So this is not a new idea. We see this from Moses and Elisha. This is not as radical as it may seem. Do we understand what Jesus is saying? Or are we just hearing and shaking our heads? Are we just paying lip service to this? Even in Matthew, he goes back to the Old Testament many times. You have heard it said of ancient times, you shall not murder, but whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. Now, in the ancient times, we're talking murder was just, stabby, trying to hurt people. I'm going to kill you. That was murder. But Jesus carries on to say, but I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. If you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say you fool, you'll be liable to the hell of fire. So it's in our heart. Loving our enemy, has to start in our heart. A lot of times, who do we count as our enemy? That person who cut you off on the highway? Let's go down on 70 and see how many enemies we have when we're driving down the road. That person who cuts in front of you, do you immediately go, hey, you no good, that sort of anger that comes in. Are they our enemy? Are they just someone who just has to be there better than we do? Can we fly that off? Can we let it go? So where we can go for a good example of how we should act is there a great story in the Bible that shows us how we should be as far as loving our enemies. I fall back on Joseph. If you remember the story of Joseph, he had 11 brothers who abused him, who disliked him severely. They threw him into a pit. They were going to kill him. Then they decided to sell him into slavery. Tell me they're not an enemy. Tell me they're not against him. But then what happens to Joseph? He's sold into slavery. Well, more bad things happen once he's sold into slavery, doesn't he? Once he's sold into slavery, someone accuses him of something, he's put into jail, he's forgotten about, but yet in the end, he comes through it and he becomes the leader of Egypt. And now his brothers come to him because they're having a hard time. Now, in modern times, wouldn't it be easy to say for Joseph, you're here? I was talking to the children this morning and asking them, what would you do if your brothers or these people came to you asking for your help after they did all that to you? What would you do? The one kid said, I'd say no. That's a natural reaction, isn't it? That's something we would do. Look, this guy's bad to me. No, you don't get no help. Go back and starve. But let's go to Genesis 43, verses 3 through 5 and verse 15. As they're standing before him, Joseph goes, I am Joseph. They couldn't recognize him because where he was at this time, they did not expect him to be there. He was dressed differently. He looked differently. He most certainly wasn't the guy in the pit anymore. He was someone different. He goes, I am Joseph, he said to his brothers. Is my father still alive? He asked about his father because he misses his family and his father. But his brothers were speechless. They were stunned to realize that Joseph was standing there in front of them. Joseph was right there. Didn't we leave him to be sold? They were kind of figuring he'd be gone. He's sold to slavery. He's gone. We don't have to think about him anymore. He's done. That little troubled kid is no more. But right there he is. The leader of he had all the power of Egypt in his hands. If he would have said, take him out, he could have told the guards right there and then, take him out, get him out of here. He could have taken revenge upon them right there. But he didn't. He continues on and says, please come closer, he said to them. So they came closer. And he said again, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery in Egypt. But don't be upset. Don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve our life, your lives. Then in verse 15, then Joseph kissed each of his brothers. He wept over them, and after that they began talking freely with him. He forgave them. He went back to them and he loved on them. He kissed them. There's a great example of how we should be to the people who would abuse us, to the people who would hurt us, the people who wanted to kill us. We have to go to them and love on them. Love our enemies. But in this, what Joseph did is he listened to God and he put everything into God because God had a plan for him. We don't always know God's plan, but it happened. And he forgave and showed mercy, just like the Father shows mercy to us. And he wept with his brothers, and they got to know each other again. They were family. And yet, can we count them as enemies? So who are your enemies? Who are the ones who would hurt you? Who are the ones that you can love? Who are the ones that you can show this greatness to? So that we can be children of the Most High, for He is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Is what Jesus says, and do we listen to what that is? Do we understand? When he talks about the wicked and the ungrateful, do we know who the wicked and ungrateful are? We are the wicked ungrateful, and God shows us mercy. Loving our enemies, we put lip service to it many times, but do we actually practice what we say or do? Or do we just love to get back at who we believe to be the ones we call enemies? The ones who hurt us. It's not right to hurt them back. Jesus says, no, don't resist an evildoer, Matthew 5:39. Do we know what it means if you read the rest of this passage in Matthew? Is it exactly like the passage in Luke is talking about? We give them our other cheek, our shirt. We ask for another mile. Someone takes from you. If someone smacks you on the cheek, you give the other cheek. Someone takes your coat. He says, give them your shirt. If people take from you and they ask more from you, you give back to them. This sounds terrible. This sounds radical, doesn't it? But it's not. We know that. And if we listen closely, we know what we need to do. Think about what's a great example of how we should be. You look at Jesus Christ, who took up all of our sin, all of our wickedness, all of our ungratefulness upon himself and was crucified on the cross. And yet before he was crucified, as they are physically hurting him, what does he do? He prays for the ones who are hurting him, the ones who have abused him, the ones who have spit upon him, who have beaten him. He prays for them. He prays for them all. Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Loving our enemies can be tough. Loving our enemies can be a challenge. We do this so we can be merciful. So we can be merciful like our Father is merciful. That's how it ends. That's how this ends. Be merciful like your Father who is merciful. We do this because we are the wicked and the ungrateful. How many times have we turned away from God? How many times did the Jewish people turn away from God because of their ungratefulness? They were saved from slavery. Moses brought them out of Egypt, out of slavery. They went into the desert, and what was the first thing they did? Yeah, we're hungry. What are we doing? Coming out here to die? Oh, where's some food? Where's some water? Constantly asking for stuff, turning away from God. One of the first things they did, they built an idol to a golden calf. Are we that way sometimes? We're the wicked, ungrateful, and yet Jesus died for us. God was merciful to us, and we're counted as children of the Most High. And Christ is just asking us to be that way. Are we listening? Are we understanding? Is this a radical idea? No, because God has been doing this for us from the very beginning, from the very start. God has loved us. It's not radical. It's just harder. It's just hard sometimes to do what God asks us to do, isn't it? It's hard for us to be the way we are, to turn away from who we are. With that, let's come together in prayer.